van Beethoven was a classical composer during the Romantic era. His barrier in life was his deafness. His deafness made it hard to write and play his music, which was a very important part of his life since he was a composer, and that's primarily how he made his money. But even though he was hindered by his deafness, he kept going and writing music during his lifetime. He wrote his fifth up to his ninth symphonies while mostly deaf, some of them being completely deaf. His fifth and ninth symphonies became his most famous pieces. To understand Ludwig van Beethoven and how he became one of the world's greatest composers despite his deafness, we must first understand his childhood and how he became affiliated with music. Beethoven's grandfather was a bass player in the court of Bonn, an electorate of Cologne, a principality of the Holy Roman Empire. Later, his grandfather became a maestro of the court. Beethoven's father was a good musician too, but was still being supported by Beethoven's grandfather as an adult. When he was young, Beethoven had a rare ability to focus, and this is probably an ability that helped him. But however, he only went to school until the age of 10. Because of his family's financial situation, he was not able to keep going beyond that. When his father saw Ludwig's talents, he wanted to turn his son into the new Mozart, who was very influential at the time for being one of the greatest composers ever. Because of this, his father provided him with a musical education. It was mostly an unorganized study, working with musicians from the court, and after that, an actor. After 2 years of this unorganized study, Beethoven finally started working with a teacher who was a musician named Christian Gottlob Neff. Neff became one of Beethoven's friends, and Neff wrote this in a music magazine about Beethoven. This young genius deserves to be supported in his artistic endeavors. He is surely to become a second Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Eventually, Beethoven would start writing pieces and getting a good reputation. By age 16, he was teaching music lessons and playing concerts for aristocrats. After doing this for a while, he left to go train in Vienna with Mozart. However, Mozart himself did not actually train him. Mozart did listen to Beethoven play, and Mozart said to watch out for him. By 1800, Beethoven was well known for his music, and had already written 3 symphonies, his fourth coming soon. His third symphony was the favorite by this time, thought to represent his life. But by this time, he was starting to notice that he was starting to go deaf. In 1804, he wrote a letter to one of his few friends talking about how he noticed he had hearing problems. His deafness started to affect him and made him not be able to play in his concerts, and it also became harder for him to write music. As he coped with this increasing deafness, he continued to write symphonies. During this time of half-deafness, he started to write what's considered one of his best pieces of music, and one of the best symphonies ever written, his Fifth Symphony. While writing this piece, he was losing a lot more hearing, making writing the piece much harder than normal. Still, Beethoven got through it, and his Fifth Symphony became a cornerstone for modern music. Now you might be asking, well, how did he write this music if he was deaf? As I noted before, Beethoven began his music training at a very young age, which meant that he'd been playing for most of his life, and had probably known most of the rules, and also knew how the notes coincided with each other by this time. Now this doesn't mean that Beethoven's music did not change. During this time, he was a lot more lonely and spent more of his time alone at home. So his music started to sound darker than the music he wrote before. By 1820, Beethoven was completely deaf. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony has become one of the world's most important symphonies ever. In World War II, it was especially important. During the war, the opening of the symphony became the symbol for victory within the Allied forces. Using the sequence in Morse code, ... which means V, was a signal for victory and boosted morale. It was also ironic since the Fifth Symphony was a famous German piece. Beethoven himself stood as a symbol against dictatorship because he did not support Napoleon when he made himself emperor in 1804. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony is still one of the most played pieces today. There is also a part in the music in which the low strings play together, which is the cello and the basses. That passage has become the piece that many orchestras use as tryout music for bass players. In conclusion, Beethoven's barrier was his deafness, which made writing music for him very hard. But since his whole life was music, he knew what sounded right and was able to keep writing. Because of his love of music, he never let his disability stop him. He wrote his most famous pieces, his Fifth Symphony, which he was almost deaf, and his Ninth while completely deaf. The Fifth Symphony, becoming his most famous piece, is still one of the most played symphonies today, and was also very important in World War II.